The call came on a Thursday, 2:47 in the afternoon. I remember because I was standing in a glass-walled conference room on the 31st floor of a building I'd leased 18 months earlier, watching my team close the second largest deal in our company's history, $43 million. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. Mom. I almost let it ring. Almost. But the thing about being the daughter who always picks up is that even when you've built an empire from the ground up, even when you sign checks larger than your parents' house, the reflex doesn't die. It just learns to hide. So I stepped into the hallway, pressed the green button, and heard my mother say 7 words that rearranged something permanent inside my chest. Your brother needs $80,000. Today. No hello. No how are you. No congratulations on the deal she didn't know about because she'd never asked. Just the invoice. Just the amount. Just today. Like urgency was a password that unlocked my bank account on command. I leaned against the hallway wall. The carpet was gray. The ceiling lights hummed at a frequency that always reminded me of the fluorescent tubes in the kitchen where I grew up. What happened? He crashed the car. Which car, Mom? The Ferrari, Naomi. The one we got him. She said it like I should have known. Like the Ferrari was a household appliance everyone was already aware of. Except I wasn't aware of it. Not the purchase. Not the insurance situation. Not the fact that my parents, who told me at 17 that they couldn't afford to help with my college tuition, had apparently found the budget for a $212,000 sports car for my younger brother Caleb, the son who had never held a job longer than 4 months and whose most consistent talent was convincing people that potential was the same thing as performance. 80,000. What's the 84? The damage to the other vehicle. And the legal situation. Caleb's attorney says if we settle before it goes further. She trailed off. Mom, was anyone hurt? A pause. The other driver went to the hospital. But Caleb is fine. She said it in that order. Let that sink in. The other driver went to the hospital. But Caleb is fine. My brother put a human being in a hospital bed, and my mother led with his safety, not theirs. I closed my eyes. The hallway was quiet. Through the glass wall, I could see my team shaking hands, smiling, popping a bottle of something sparkling. $43 million in new contracts. And my mother was calling to ask me to clean up another one of Caleb's disasters like I was still the 12-year-old girl who mopped up his messes because nobody else would. I said the only word that mattered. No. Then I hung up. And for the first time in my life, I did not call back. Before I go any further, if this story already sounds familiar, if you've ever been the sibling who built everything while the other one burned through everything, hit subscribe right now and drop your age and your city in the comments. I want to know who's listening and where you're hearing this from. My name is Naomi. I'm 34. And this is the story of how my parents spent every dollar they had turning my brother into their golden child while I became invisible, how he destroyed everything they gave him including a $212,000 Ferrari, and how I built a company worth $90 million on the foundation of every single thing they refused to give me. To understand the phone call, you have to understand the kitchen. 1997. I was 7. Caleb was 4. We were sitting at a yellow Formica table in a rental house in Bakersfield, California, the kind of house where the hallway light flickered and the carpet smelled like someone else's dog. Dad worked at a body shop. Mom did bookkeeping for a dental practice. Money was a conversation that happened in whispers after we went to bed, but even at 7, I could hear the math through the walls. It didn't add up. Caleb was what the family called spirited, what the teachers called disruptive, what I even at 7 recognized as someone who had learned that noise gets attention and attention gets rewards. He threw his plate once at dinner because he didn't like the chicken. Mom cleaned it up, made him a sandwich, kissed his forehead. I watched from across the table. I'd eaten every bite on my plate, including the chicken I also didn't like, because I understood something Caleb never had to learn. In this house, good behavior was not rewarded. It was expected. And expected things are invisible. The pattern started small and calcified over years the way scar tissue does, layer by layer until the shape becomes permanent. When I made the honor roll in 5th grade, Mom nodded and said good, keep it up. When Caleb brought home a C- in 3rd grade, Dad took him to the batting cages to cheer him up. When I won a regional math competition at 13, nobody came to the ceremony. Mom had to take Caleb to a dentist appointment. Caleb's dentist appointment was at 10 in the morning. My ceremony was at 4 in the afternoon. I did the math on that too. When Caleb got suspended for fighting in 8th grade, My parents hired a tutor, enrolled him in a martial arts program to channel his energy, and bought him a new skateboard because the therapist said he needed positive reinforcement. Total cost that semester, $4,200. I know because I saw the credit card statement on the kitchen counter. That same year, I asked for $60 to attend a coding workshop at the community college. Mom said we'll see, which in our house meant no wrapped in maybe. I didn't go. I taught myself Python from a library book instead. That library book is still on my shelf. I keep it the way some people keep scars, proof that the wound was real even after the skin closes over. Here's where it starts to hurt. And I mean the kind of hurt that doesn't announce itself. It just moves in and rearranges the furniture so slowly you don't notice until one day you're standing in your own life and nothing is where you left it. I was 17, senior year. I had a 4.3 GPA, a stack of college brochures on my desk, and a plan. Computer science at a state university. In-state tuition, $22,000 a year. I'd already applied for scholarships and gotten two. They covered about 40%. I needed my parents to help with the rest. Not all of it, just the gap. Just enough to keep me from drowning in loans before I'd even started swimming. I sat them down at that same yellow Formica table, which they'd moved to the new house by then, a slightly bigger rental with a garage Dad used for side jobs. I brought a printed spreadsheet, tuition breakdown, scholarship amounts, estimated living costs, projected loan interest over 10 years. I was 17 years old and I presented a financial plan with color-coded columns because that's who I was. That's who they'd trained me to be. The one who prepared. The one who had answers. The one who made it easy to say yes. Dad looked at the spreadsheet for about 6 seconds. Mom didn't look at it at all. She was watching Caleb through the kitchen window. He was in the driveway, doing tricks on the skateboard they'd bought him after his suspension. Naomi, we just can't right now, Mom said. Your father's truck needs new brakes. Caleb's going to need a car next year when he turns 16. Things are tight. I pointed at the spreadsheet. If I take the federal loan for the remaining amount, I'll be paying it off until I'm 32. She looked at me, not unkindly, worse than unkindly, blankly. You're smart, Naomi. You'll figure it out. 6 words. I carried them out of that kitchen like a diagnosis. You'll figure it out didn't mean they believed in me. It meant they'd decided I wasn't their problem. Caleb was their problem. Caleb was always their problem. And problems get resources because problems make noise and noise gets attention and attention gets money. I was not a problem. I was a solution. And solutions, in my family, funded themselves. I figured it out. I took the loans, all of them, $94,000 by the time I graduated, accruing interest at 6.8%. I worked 2 campus jobs simultaneously, a computer lab monitor during the week and a data entry clerk for a local insurance company on weekends. I ate rice and canned vegetables for so many months that the smell of jasmine rice still takes me back to a dorm room the size of a parking space where I coded until 2 in the morning and set my alarm for 6. My hands would cramp around the third hour of typing. I'd flex them under the desk lamp and keep going because stopping wasn't a category I recognized. Stopping was a luxury, and luxuries belonged to Caleb. Meanwhile, Caleb got a car at 16, not a used Honda, a BMW 3 Series, $38,000. I know because Dad mentioned it on a phone call like it was weather. Got Caleb set up with a nice ride. He's real happy. I was eating ramen in a dorm room with a laptop I'd bought refurbished for $400. Caleb was driving a BMW. And the most corrosive part, the part I couldn't have named then but can name now, was that nobody saw the contradiction. Nobody in my family looked at those two realities side by side and felt the asymmetry. Because in their story, Caleb needed help and Naomi didn't. Caleb was struggling and Naomi was fine. Caleb required investment and Naomi was already invested in by the universe or by her own brain or by whatever magic they imagined made me self-sufficient. Let me jump ahead for years because I need you to see what happened when I stopped being invisible and started being valuable. I graduated with a degree in computer science and a minor in business analytics. I was 22, $94,000 in debt, and exhausted in a way that lived behind my eyes like a permanent weather system. I got a job at a mid-level tech firm in San Jose. Starting salary, $71,000. It sounded like a fortune until I ran the numbers. Rent in the Bay Area, loan payments, the basics of staying alive. I was clearing about $800 a month after everything. I didn't complain. I never complained. That was the deal. Naomi doesn't complain. Naomi executes. Naomi figures it out. Within 18 months, I'd been promoted twice. Within 3 years, I was leading a product development team of 14. My boss, a woman named Sandra Chen who had built her own career on the same kind of quiet, relentless competence that ran through my veins like a second bloodstream, pulled me aside after a quarterly review and said something that changed the trajectory of everything. "You're not an employee, Naomi. You're a founder who hasn't started yet." I laughed. She didn't. She gave me the name of a venture capital contact and told me to call him before someone else figured out what she already knew. I called him the next day. 4 months later, I had a seed round. 7 months after that, I had a company. I built a data analytics platform for mid-market companies, the ones too big for spreadsheets and too small for enterprise software. The gap nobody was serving. I saw it because I'd spent my whole life in gaps. The gap between what I deserved and what I received. The gap between what I gave my family and what was acknowledged. The gap between the child they funded and the child they forgot. My entire career was built on pattern recognition, and the first pattern I ever recognized was my own invisibility. The company grew, not virally, not overnight. It grew the way I grew, quietly, persistently, compounding in the dark where nobody was watching. Year 1, $340,000 in revenue. Year 2, $1.8 million. Year 3, $7.2 million. I didn't post about it on social media, didn't call home to announce it, didn't update my profiles with champagne photos and captions about blessing and vision. I just worked, the way I'd always worked, silently, relentlessly, and completely alone. While my company was doubling revenue every year, here is what was happening at home. Caleb dropped out of community college after 1 semester. Then he started a clothing brand that produced exactly 0 garments and cost my parents $15,000 in startup capital. Then he managed a gym for 6 months before getting fired for not showing up. Then he got into real estate, which meant he got a license, sold 1 condo, and spent the commission in 3 weeks. Each failure was met with the same parental response: empathy, funding, another chance. Mom called me after each one, not to ask for money yet, not quite yet, but to narrate Caleb's journey with the reverence of a biographer describing a misunderstood genius. He's just finding himself. Naomi, not everyone figures it out as fast as you did, as fast as I did, as if speed were the variable, as if the reason I succeeded was some innate velocity and not the fact that I had no safety net, no BMW, no second chance, no kitchen table where someone said we'll figure this out together. I succeeded because the alternative was drowning. Caleb never had to learn to swim because the water never reached his neck. Then came the Ferrari. 2 years before that Thursday phone call, my parents called to tell me they were taking out a home equity line of credit. Not for a roof repair, not for medical bills for Caleb. He had a new real estate opportunity, they said. A partnership with a developer in the valley. He needed capital to show he was serious. They borrowed $180,000 against their house. Of that amount, $212,000 including additional financing went toward what Caleb called an investment vehicle and what the rest of the world calls a red Ferrari 488 Spider. I wish I were making this up. The remaining funds went to Caleb's living expenses, rent on an apartment he couldn't afford, meals at restaurants he posted on Instagram with captions like grinding and vision loading. My parents, who had told me at 17 that they couldn't afford $12,000 a year toward my education, had leveraged their home to buy their 28-year-old son a car that costs more than most people's houses. I found out about the Ferrari from Instagram, not from my parents, from Caleb's feed. A photo of him leaning against it, sunglasses, white sneakers, arms crossed, with the caption, "When you bet on yourself, the universe matches your energy." 847 likes. My mother commented with 3 heart emojis and 1 word: proud. I stared at that word for a very long time. Proud. She was proud of a car purchase with debt secured against a house I'd offered to help them pay off 2 years earlier, an offer they declined because Dad said we don't take handouts from our kids. Handouts from their daughter who earned every dollar. No, $212,000 sports car for their son who hadn't earned any of it. Absolutely. I closed Instagram, opened my laptop, and went back to work. My company had just crossed $40 million in annual revenue. I had 127 employees. I was negotiating a Series C round that would value the company at $90 million. And my mother was typing proud under a picture of a Ferrari my brother bought with her house. Do you know what it's like to build something extraordinary and have nobody in your family notice? Not because they're busy, not because they're unaware, but because the extraordinary thing was built by the wrong child. The child who wasn't supposed to be the story. The child who was supposed to be the infrastructure. If you know that feeling, tell me about it in the comments. I want to hear every word you've been holding back. Then came the crash. A Saturday night in September, Caleb was driving the Ferrari on a canyon road north of Los Angeles. He was going 93 miles per hour in a 45 zone. The toxicology report, which I obtained later through the insurance claim documents, showed a blood alcohol level of 0.11, well over the legal limit. He crossed the center line and struck an oncoming Honda Civic driven by a 31-year-old woman named Diana Reeves. Diana broke her collarbone, 3 ribs, and fractured her left wrist. She was hospitalized for 9 days. The Ferrari was totaled, scattered across the canyon road in pieces of red fiberglass and shattered aspiration. Caleb walked away with bruised ribs and a citation. The universe apparently had matched his energy. My parents' insurance didn't cover the damages. The policy on the Ferrari had lapsed 3 months earlier because Caleb forgot to make the premium payment and my parents didn't follow up. The home equity line was maxed. Their savings had been rooted to Caleb's lifestyle for years. They were staring down a lawsuit from Diana Reeves's attorney, an $80,000 initial settlement demand, and the very real possibility of losing their home, the same house they'd mortgaged to buy a car their son just wrapped around a canyon wall at twice the speed limit while drunk. That's when Mom called me, 2:47 on a Thursday afternoon. Your brother needs $80,000 today. And that's when I said no, 1 syllable, 2 letters. The smallest word I'd ever spoken and the largest thing I'd ever done. The aftermath of that no was a weather system. It moved through my family in waves, each one revealing something the previous one had hidden. The first wave was silence. 48 hours of absolute nothing. No calls, no texts, no emails. The silence was so complete I checked my phone twice to make sure it was functioning. They expected me to crack, to call back, to apologize for having a boundary. When I didn't, they had no contingency plan. The second wave was dead. He called Saturday morning, voice careful and measured, the tone he uses when he's been coached by Mom but is trying to sound independent. Naomi, your mother and I have been talking. We understand you're upset, but this is family. We need to come together right now. Dad, I'm not upset. I'm clear. There's a difference. He paused. Caleb made a mistake. People make mistakes. He put a woman in the hospital, Dad. Driving drunk in a car you mortgaged your house to buy him. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern. And patterns have price tags. Another pause, longer. We're not asking you to approve of what he did. We're asking you to help. You're asking me to pay for it. The way you've always paid for Caleb. Except now the bill has a comma in it. So you need the daughter with the bank account. I've always been the bank account, Dad. That's the only version of me this family knows how to need. He didn't respond. He just exhaled the way he does, long and slow and deflating. The sound of a man who knows the truth has entered the room and is hoping it will leave quietly if he stays perfectly still. I'll let your mother know, he said. You do that. The third wave was Caleb. This surprised me. We hadn't spoken directly in nearly 8 months. Our relationship existed entirely through Mom's narration, a curated version where he was always almost succeeding and I was always doing fine. He texted me Sunday night. 5 messages, spaced about 10 minutes apart, which meant he was workshopping each one. Naomi, I know we haven't talked in a while. I'm going through something really hard right now. I'm not asking for a handout, I'm asking for help from my sister. I know you have the means. This isn't about pride, it's about survival. If I go down, Mom and Dad go down too. Think about that. I read each message the way I'd read a balance sheet. The structure was textbook. Step 1, establish emotional connection. Step 2, reframe the ask as mutual benefit. Step 3, minimize the amount relative to the other person's resources. Step 4, attach collateral damage to the refusal. Make the consequences about everyone except the person who caused them. If I go down, Mom and Dad go down too. He wasn't asking for help. He was holding our parents hostage and telling me to pay the ransom. I typed one message back. I won't be funding this. If mom and dad need financial counseling to navigate their situation, I'll pay for a licensed advisor. That's my offer. He read it. The blue check marks confirmed it. Then nothing. No response. Not that night. Not the next day. Not ever. That message is the last communication Caleb and I have exchanged. The fourth wave was the one I'd been bracing for since I was 7 years old. Mom called on a Tuesday, 11 days after my no. She didn't start with hello. She started with a verdict. You have more money than you know what to do with and you won't help your own brother. What does that make you, Naomi? It makes me someone with boundaries, Mom. Boundaries. She said the word like it tasted spoiled, like something found at the back of the refrigerator. You know what boundaries are. They're walls selfish people build so they don't have to feel guilty. I felt the old pull, the gravitational force of her disappointment that had been shaping my orbit for 3 decades. The urge to apologize, to explain, to open the checkbook and purchase my way back into the family story. But I stayed in my chair. I stayed in my own voice. Mom, you remortgaged your house to buy Caleb a Ferrari. You told me at 17 you couldn't afford to help with my tuition. I built everything I have without a single dollar from this family. And now you're calling me selfish because I won't write a check to cover a drunk driving settlement for a car that should never have existed. She went quiet. I kept going because for once the words were coming and I wasn't going to damn them. You've spent 30 years investing in Caleb and overlooking me. That was your choice. But you don't get to overlook me and invoice me. Those two things cannot coexist. Not anymore. Her voice cracked, not with sadness, with the sound of a narrative fracturing under its own accumulated weight. I sacrificed everything for you kids. Everything. You sacrificed everything for one of your kids, Mom. The other one has been sacrificing for you. And she doesn't even get a thank you. She just gets a phone call when the bill comes due. Mom hung up. I sat in my office, 31 floors above a city that didn't know or care about any of this, and let the silence settle like dust after a controlled demolition. Controlled being the important word. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd just stopped holding it up. The fifth wave came from the periphery. A cousin texted me a screenshot of a Facebook post Caleb had written. Long, emotional, strategically vague. About family that turns their back on you when you're at your lowest. About people who let money change who they are. About loyalty being tested and found wanting. 93 comments. All sympathetic. Mom had liked it and commented, "We love you, baby. Always." I studied that screenshot the way I'd study a quarterly report from a company trying to hide insolvency. Lots of emotion on the surface. No substance underneath. No mention of the drunk driving. No mention of Diana Reeves in her hospital bed. No mention of the $212,000 car bought with his parents' home as collateral. Just the performance. Just the curated suffering of a man who had never faced a consequence he couldn't cry his way out of until now. I didn't respond. Didn't post my side. Didn't call the cousins to correct the record. I closed the screenshot and went back to the spreadsheet on my screen. My Series C closed 3 weeks later. Valuation, $90 million. I told no one in my family. 6 months passed. The lawsuit settled, not for $80,000, for $135,000, because Caleb's cut rate attorney was no match for Diana Reeves's firm. My parents sold the house, the one they'd mortgaged to buy a car that no longer existed, the one with the garage where Dad did side jobs and the kitchen with the yellow Formica table where I'd been told at 17 to figure it out. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment 20 minutes outside the city. Dad went back to hourly work at 61. Mom stopped posting on Facebook entirely. Caleb moved in with a friend, then a different friend, then a girlfriend whose lease could absorb him. His Instagram went dark. The grinding captions disappeared. The universe had recalculated his energy. I sent my parents a letter, not a text, not an email. A letter, handwritten on paper, because some things deserve the weight of ink and the slowness of a stamp. I told them I loved them. I told them I wasn't punishing anyone. I told them that everything I'd refused to fund was not withheld out of cruelty, but out of a clarity I wished I'd found sooner. The clarity that being used is not the same as being loved, and that bankrolling someone's self-destruction is not generosity, it is complicity dressed in good intentions. I told them my door was open, but that the door had a condition now. It required them to see me, not my bank account, not my ability to absorb emergencies, not the responsible daughter who figures it out. Me, the woman who built something real from nothing while they poured everything into someone who set it on fire. Mom called after she received the letter. She didn't say much. She said, "I read it." She said, "I need time to sit with this." Then she said, "I'm sorry, Naomi," and her voice broke on my name in a way I had never heard in 34 years of being her daughter. Not performed, not rehearsed for effect. Broken. The way glass sounds when it finally stops resisting and just lets go. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But it was the first true thing she had said to me in decades. And I held it carefully. The way you hold something fragile that might become the start of something if you're patient enough to let it. Dad never called about the letter. But 2 months later, on my birthday, a card arrived. Inside, in his cramped mechanic's handwriting, 6 words. "I see you now. I'm sorry." I put the card in my desk drawer next to the library book, the Python one, the one from when I was 14, the one that exists because $60 was too much to spend on the daughter who would figure it out. 2 artifacts from 2 different chapters of the same story. One from the girl who had nothing, one from the father who finally looked. I don't know what happens next with my family. I don't control that. And I've stopped trying to. The company is mine. The life I built is mine. The silence between us is painful, but it is honest. And honest pain is 1,000 times more survivable than comfortable lies repeated across a kitchen table for 30 years. Caleb isn't a monster. He's a person who was taught from birth that he was the priority, and he believed it because why wouldn't he? Every dollar confirmed it. Every bailout reinforced it. He didn't create the system. He just never had a reason to question it until the system collapsed and there was no one left willing to rebuild it for him. Mom isn't evil. She's a woman who confused investment with love and chose the child who needed the most as the child who mattered the most, and never noticed that the quiet one in the corner was building a cathedral while she was putting out fires she kept funding. Dad isn't a villain. He's a man who spent his life deferring to the loudest voice in the room and calling it keeping the peace. He's learning slowly that peace bought with someone else's silence isn't peace at all. It's just quiet injustice. And me, I'm the woman who finally understood that you'll figure it out was never faith. It was abdication. And that the thing I figured out, the thing that took me 30 years and $94,000 in loans and 1,000 bowls of rice eaten alone in a dorm room, the thing nobody in my family expected or prepared for, was this. I figured out how to stop needing their approval, and that turned out to be worth more than every dollar I ever earned. So I'll leave you with one question. If your family only ever sees you when they need your wallet, do you keep paying for visibility, or do you finally let them discover what your absence actually costs? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, if any part of it made you feel less alone in the version of this you've been living quietly, hit subscribe. There's another story linked below about someone whose family bet everything against them and lost. I think you need to hear it. I'll see you there.